Dear Madam.
Dear Larry.
Dear friend.
My dear sir.
The art of letter writing has sadly declined in recent years because we now tend to communicate online and often in shorthand. For actors, words are their main means of communication, usually other people's words. But they have, across the centuries, put pen to paper in letters to express their feelings about their work, the parts they play, the plays themselves, the writers, other actors, and anything else that has concerned them. And these letters give us a vivid picture of theatrical life across the ages. Let's start with Shakespeare. There's no evidence of any letters surviving written by Shakespeare himself, even to his wife, although his plays are full of them. But a lot has been written about him, particularly by his contemporaries, who had quite strong views. This is a letter written in 1592 by the playwright Robert Greene.
Is it not strange that I, to whom they have all been beholding, is it not like that you, to whom they have all been beholding, shall be both at once of them forsaken? Yes, trust them not. For there is an upstart crow, beautified with our feathers, that with his tiger's heart wrapped in a player's hide, supposes he is well able to bombast out a blank verse as the best of you. Ugh. Damn. And being an absolute Johannes factotum is, in his own conceit, the only shake scene in the country. Blast!
Greene is reported to have died of a surfeit of Rhenish wine and pickled herrings, and of Shakespeare by the sound of it. The actor David Garrick, who was the darling of the 18th century theatre, actually started off life as a wine merchant. But the lure of performance and his experiences of performing Shakespeare soon changed his focus. And he writes to his brother about his decision.
My mind, as you must know, has always been inclined to the stage, nay, so strongly so that my illness and lowness of spirits was owing to the want of resolution to tell you my thoughts. Finding at last both my inclination and interest required some new way of life, I have chose the most agreeable to myself, and, though I know you will be much displeased at me, yet I hope you shall find that I have the genius of an actor, without the vices. You will not be ashamed to own me as a brother. Last night I played Richard III, to the surprise of everybody, and as I shall make nearly £300 per annum by it, it is really what I dote upon, and am resolved to pursue it.
The French have never really taken to Shakespeare, preferring their own writers, I suppose. This dislike of the great English bard was expressed most forcibly in a letter from Voltaire after hearing that some of Shakespeare's plays were to be translated into French.
I must tell you how implacably furious I am with one Tourneur, said to be Secretary of the National Library, who is certainly not secretary of good taste, have you perchance cast an eye over the 2 volumes this reptile has written, in which he attempts to make us recognise one Shakespeare as the only true model of tragedy? He calls him the god of theatre. He sacrifices all Frenchmen like idols, as pigs to cherries. He does not deign to mention Corneille and Racine, the 2 great men. There are already 2 published works by this Shakespeare, which you would take for the fairground pantomime of 2 centuries ago. The blood fizzes in my veins just talking to you about him. And frightful though it may seem, the monster has a following in France. And to heap calamity on horror, it was I who was the first to speak of this Shakespeare. I was the first to show the French the few miserable pearls in the enormous dunghill of his work. To think that I should have to live to see the day when I, Voltaire, was responsible for knocking the crowns off the noble heads of Corneille and Racine, only to see them adorn the head of this barbarian mummer.
The plays of the barbarian mummer continued to be popular with British audiences. There were many attempts to liven up the tragedies, even giving some of them a happy ending. The theatre manager, Tate Wilkinson, attempted to give the actor Thomas King some advice about his playing of the gravedigger in Hamlet. He suggested he should eat cheese sandwiches and wear lots of waistcoats to improve the comedy business. King wrote a letter back.
As to your question, how I dressed the gravedigger, I affect no novelty. I follow other respectable performers I have formerly seen. What may have been done in former times, I am unable to say, but I have been a member of the Theatre Royal in London and Dublin 7 or 8 and 40 years. And I have never been present when Shakespeare has been degraded and the common sense of an audience insulted in the way you mention. Who could descend to the eating of bread and cheese at the grave? To divest his last waistcoat would violate propriety like the peeling of an onion.
When actresses were allowed to replace the boys of Shakespeare's time, there were many who made a great name for themselves. One of the most memorable was Sarah Siddons. She was a favourite of Queen Charlotte, wife of George III, and sent a letter to her friend describing her performances for the Queen at Windsor Castle in 1813.
I got there about 3 and was conducted into a very elegant drawing room where I sat until it was time to go to the castle. We conducted for some part of Henry VIII, some part of the Merchant of Venice, and to finish with some scenes from Hamlet. The Queen, the Princesses, and the Duchess of York all came to me and conversed most graciously till the Queen took her place. Then the company seated themselves, and I began. It all went off to my heart's content, for the room was the finest place for the voice in the world. I found the Queen had been desirous that I should stay and read to her again at the castle the next night. So the next night I read Othello to the royal party at the castle. And here my story ends. With undiminished affection, S.S.
The painter Benjamin Haydon sent a letter to his friend Mary Mitford about a possible reason for the great acting talent of Sarah Siddons.
My dear Mary, the other night I paid my butcher. "Ah, sir," he said, "I have a fancy for genius, sir. Yes, sir. Mrs. Siddons has eaten my meat, sir. Never was such a woman for chops.
and he drew up his beefy, shiny face, clean shaved with a clean blue cravat under his chin, a clean jacket, a clean apron, and a pair of hands that would pin an ox to the earth if he was obstreperous. Ah, sir, she were a wonderful creature. Ah, sir, when she used to act that there character, I say to my sister, that's their woman, that murders a king between 'em. That's it, sir, Lady Macbeth. Aha, my lady, says I, if it wasn't for my meat, though, you wouldn't be able to do that. I soon perceived that the man's ambition was to feed genius. I should commend you to him. Is he not a capital fellow? Think of Lady Macbeth eating chops. Yours affectionately, Ben.
Like Garrick before him, Edmund Kean became the leading actor of the 19th century. His performances, however, especially in Shakespeare, were given a rather mixed reception, especially by writers of letters to the newspaper of the day, The Examiner.
Sir, I am convinced that Mr. Kean's deficiency of dignity does not in the slightest degree disqualify him as a representative of Shakespeare's Othello. There is a delicacy of taste and feelings about this extraordinary young actor that must be instinctive. His genius in this appears to me to bear a striking resemblance to Shakespeare himself. Had they lived in the same day, Shakespeare would have stretched out his human hand to him and have welcomed him with delight, as at least a kindred spirit. Anonymous.
This is an open letter to Mr. Kean. Sir, I am afraid that you may consider a newspaper an odd channel for the advice which I wish to give you, which is not to mind what the newspapers say. One paper says, the frequent smile which Mr. Kean wore as Richard destroys the dignity of the character. A weekly publication states that Mr. Kean's extreme decrepitude in Shylock cast an air of imbecility over the malice of the character. But why should I share remarks which I have just advised you not to attend to? Yours, etc., etc.
Often it was an actor's fellow performers who made it quite clear how they felt. The actress Fanny Kemble left Britain to perform in America, where she had, if we're to believe her letters, the misfortune of having to act with the irascible Charles Macready. It was a very famous stage partnership, but one that she absolutely loathed. She writes about it to her friend Harriet.
I had a 3-hour rehearsal this morning, and Macready was there. He is not courteous, pleasant, or even well-bred. A discussion having arisen as to the situation of a table, which he wished on the stage and I wished removed, he exhibited considerable irritability and ill humour. He is unnecessarily violent in acting, and I congratulated myself that as Lady Macbeth I could not suffer from this, but was astonished and dismayed when at the exclamation, "Bring forth men, children only," he seized me ferociously by the wrist and compelled me to make a demi-volte or pirouette such as I think that lady never had to perform before. Macready is not pleasant to act with, as he keeps no specific time for his exits or entrances, comes on while one is in the middle of a soliloquy, and goes off while one is in the middle of a speech to him. He growls and prowls and roams and foams about the stage in every direction like a tiger in his cage, so that I never know on what side of me he means to be, and keeps up a perpetual snarling and grumbling like the aforesaid tiger, so that I am never quite sure when he has done and that it is my turn to speak. I do not know how Desdemona might have affected me under other circumstances, but my feeling about acting it with Mr. Macready is dread of his personal violence. I quail at the idea of his laying hold of me in those terrible, passionate scenes. If that foolish creature, Desdemona, hadn't persisted in talking long after she had been smothered and stabbed to death, one might escape by the offside of the bed. I wish I was with you and Dorothy at St. Leonard's-on-Sea, instead of struggling here for my life with Macready. Farewell, believe me. Ever yours, most respectfully, Fanny.
Bridging the gap between the 19th and 20th centuries, another legendary actress, Ellen Terry, performed many Shakespearean roles. But she often had her doubts about her success with them. As she writes to the critic Clement Scott.
It was most kind of you to suppose that I could play Lady Macbeth. You write from that point of view, which in itself is a very great compliment. For my part, I'm quite surprised to find that I'm a really useful actress, for I really am, to be able to get through such difficult parts as Ophelia, Olivia, Beatrice, Margaret, and Lady M. My aim is usefulness to my lovely art. Oh, that's not such a high ambition, is it? But I gave up dreaming long ago. And certainly, Mr. Clement, I know that I cannot do what I want to do with this part. I don't even want to be a fiend. I can't believe for a moment, won't believe for a moment, that she did conceive this murder, the one murder of which she is accused. Did she call on the spirits to be made bad because she wasn't very bad? I'm always calling on the spirits to be made good because I know I'm not very good. No, she was not good, but she was not much worse than many women you know. Me, for instance. Don't have me hung, drawn, and quartered after this. You are quite right. I cannot play Lady Macbeth because my methods are not right, and oh, nothing about it is right yet. But somehow, in the person of Lady Macbeth, I have contrived with evident subtlety to make you think I can't assume bad because I'm good. It's all rather humorous, isn't it? I wish all the best to you and your family for New Year. Ellen Terry.
Of course, actors thrive on the praise they receive for their performances. But sometimes their fans just go a little too far. And Miss Olivia Truman became absolutely smitten by the actor Herbert Beerbohm-Tree.
I'm 13 and I have never loved so passionately before. I went to Trilby on Saturday. Nothing could have kept me away. It was the greatest masterpiece of acting I have ever seen. Pure and simple genius. I've never enjoyed a play so much. Mr. Tree, your acting has convinced me, moved me and touched me, especially when you said, and meant it, love is everything. You look so handsome and played with an air of quiet, powerful distinction that was extraordinary. I nearly died of jealousy when you were raining kisses on her. Mine was real jealousy. Your Olivia.
My dear Miss Truman, I hardly know how to write to you. I do deeply appreciate the kind and beautiful letter that you sent me. And I am very proud to think that I should have been the means of inspiring such sweet and noble thoughts in you. I have not written because I did not think it right to enter into a correspondence with you, and so encourage a feeling which is only a passing phase, and which I hope will in time give place to a great-hearted devotion to someone who is worthy of it. I would most gladly meet you if your mother were with you. I will send the picture for which you asked me. With all my heart's best wishes, I am yours sincerely, Herbert Beerbohm Tree.
Olivia continued to write to her adored Herbert, and they became lifelong correspondents and friends. When he died, his widow wrote to Olivia.
My dear Olivia, Herbert spoke of you so much and loved the flowers and letters you sent. I know you grieve for him and understand my grieving. Yours very sincerely, Helen Tree.
The poet W.B. Yeats was a great admirer of the actress Mrs. Patrick Campbell and wrote to her in 1901.
I was anxious to ask if I might see you after the performance today, to tell you how much I admired you in it, but I did not like to do so. You will permit me, however, to thank you by letter for the performance of today. Your acting seemed to me to have the perfect precision of delicacy of every art at its best. It made me feel the unity of the arts in a new way. I said to myself, that is exactly what I'm trying to do in writing. To express oneself without waste, without emphasis, to be impassioned, yet to have perfect self-possession. To have precision so absolute that the slightest inflection of the voice, the slightest rhythm of sound or motion plucks the heartstrings. Again, thanking you, I am yours sincerely, W.B. Yeats.
Not all letters convey good news about a performance, of course. When Lionel Barrymore made his first appearance in his grandparents' company at the age of 15, he had a lot of problems to overcome, not least that his voice was breaking and his boots too small. He went home and found this letter from his grandmother.
My dear Lionel, I sincerely wish I did not have to write this letter, for I want to spare your feelings. But, dear boy, I am compelled to inform you of the plain facts of your portrayal of Thomas. You were somewhat inadequate, and it is with the deepest regret that I convey the news that it is no longer necessary that you appear in the cast. I shall see you in the morning, dear boy. Until then, good night.
So, all is never fair or smooth in love or theatre. This is part of a letter from a rather disgruntled touring company manager about an incident that has occurred between two of the actors in his company.
Grand Theatre, Southampton, February the 20th, 1929. Dear Sir, I enclose an exact report of a quarrel which occurred last night between Mr. Woolgast, and Mr. Tennant. Mr. Tennant is now in bed with laryngitis after Mr. Walgast's quite unjust accusation of loafing. Mr. Tennant took exception to this remark and high words ensued. Mr. Tennant claimed that Mr. Walgast called him a bastard. Mr. Tennant aimed a blow at Mr. Walgast and the latter picked up a chair and hit Mr. Tennant with it. There ensued a nasty brawl, which was heard and witnessed by stagehands, chorus men and other members of the company. Mr. Allen informed me of the trouble and I went down immediately. When I arrived, Mr. Tennant and Mr. Walgast had been separated by the chorus and the stage staff, but they were still abusing each other. Mr. Walgast was using very foul language, though there were several ladies present. I immediately cleared the room and packed Mr. Tennant and Mr. Walgast off home, as both were still in a fighting mood. Before going, Mr. Walgast tendered his resignation and told me that he was fed up with the show and he'd be glad to be out of it. I have no brief for Mr. Tennant, who was never really strong in the part, but he certainly tried his best.
Even the most experienced of performers has to sometimes respond to criticism, especially from their fans. Sybil Thorndike responds to a letter sent to her about their wartime touring production of Macbeth, which this correspondent had seen at the Tredegar Hall in Wales.
Dear Miss Long, I'm so very sorry you didn't like our performance at all. Standard of touring productions is bound to be different from that of the Old Vic, where we have a big stage and room to dress. The Tredegar Hall was the most difficult place I've ever had to speak in. We were warned before, and we thought we'd been careful, but the chattering of 4 or 5 people near the front made things very hard. Of course, we have no business not to be heard. That's terrible. And the first witch's adenoids were on purpose. It was I that played her. As we can only travel a certain number of actors, we have to adapt ourselves. Also, the ice cream selling during the murder scene certainly was horrible in the midst of that lovely blackness. But it was put right and never happened again. I know Welsh audiences very well. My home is Wales, my husband is Welsh, and we love the people dearly, and would never dream of not giving our best to the most intelligent public we have ever played before. Please forgive. I'm so sorry that you and your friends were disappointed. We were so happy in Tredegar and loved the audiences very much. It did hurt a lot when you said that we were an insult. No one loves Wales and the Welsh more than we do, and the lovely intelligence and sensitivity of them, with the exception of our chatty friends. Yours very sincerely, Sybil Casson. P.S. I wonder if you know the stage at Tredegar. The amateurs implored us to complain, as the putting on of a play there is so hard. And the dressing rooms, well, they aren't. But this is going to be altered, I believe.
Sometimes it is the theatre itself that attracts very negative comments. This is a letter from George Bernard Shaw to the manager of the Royal Court Theatre, after he had sat through a matinee performance of Candida there on a very cold afternoon.
Archer came into my box because he could not stand the cold in the stalls. 4 cases of frostbite were treated at the Chelsea infirmary, and one man in the dress circle got so rheumatic after the second act that he had to be lifted out by the attendants. The fireman caught one man attempting to set fire to the theatre. There is not a hook or hat peg in the boxes. You can get excellent ones for 5 pence apiece. The man in box D said if there had been a hook, he would have hanged himself to draw public attention to the frightful cold. My wife was affected to tears by the play, and her tears froze, so that it took me 5 minutes to get her eyes open with the warmth of my hands, which are now covered in chilblains. My mother went to sleep, and we are still vainly trying to wake her. You can get coals and blankets from the parish hall, I believe. Why not apply? Ever GBS.
And sometimes it's the dramatist that's the object of the criticism. This is part of a very long letter written by Laurence Olivier to Christopher Fry while they were performing his play Venus Observed in America.
My dearest Kit, it is not going to be very easy, however, darling boy. Such is the least that you are due, and so here is the best that I can do. I know you are most anxious to hear about the crits. They are not, I think, savage. And knowing that, you must realise that universal opinion holds that your plays are prone to be too verbally rich for the modern ear. It is hoped that though cutting may not do you good service as a poet, it may as a dramatist. You know, darling boy, if you would act some of your roles, which I am sure you could do as well as any of us, you would find out so much that would cause you some constructive pondering. The emotions of the audience last the longest of the contributions that they bring to the theatre. Intellect wears out the quickest. After all, they have paid their money to enjoy themselves. Time and time again in Venus, in London, I would have the brutes in my hand like baby mice. And then out would come something difficult again, or obscure, or too clever. And suddenly it would be like playing in a hospital for croup. Impatience has seized them and they were gone. I must stop. I am being called. See you, dearest Kit. Love from your Larry.
And sometimes critics are kind. This is part of a letter from Kenneth Tynan to Laurence Olivier.
Dear Larry, this is just to thank you not only for giving by far the best performance of Shylock I have ever seen, but also for the privilege of watching some of it take shape. You do not need luck, or prayers, or good wishes tonight. All you need is an audience. Sincerely, Kenneth.
Harold Pinter's plays were not always well received. This is a letter from one audience member.
Dear Sir, I would be obliged if you would kindly explain to me the meaning of the birthday party. These are the points I do not understand. First, who are the 2 men? Second, where did Stanley come from? Third, Were they all supposed to be normal? You appreciate that without the answers to my questions, I cannot fully understand your play.
She is reported to have received this reply.
Dear Madam, I would be obliged if you would kindly explain to me the meaning of your letter. These are the points that I do not understand. Who are you? Where do you come from? Are you supposed to be normal? You will appreciate that without the answers to my questions, I cannot fully understand your letter.
Writers usually have very strong opinions on how they would like their plays performed. Judi Dench speaks warmly of the support that she received from the writer David Hare when she took on a role in his play Amy's View. This is an extract from a letter he sent to her a couple of weeks before they began rehearsals.
Dear Judy, somebody sent me a tape of Mrs. Brown. I think it's one of your greatest performances. It's certainly your greatest film performance. I found your grief for Albert and your relationship with the Gilly unbearably moving. It is great acting. I'm thrilled we start soon. No need to reply to this. One thing, why not be as good in my play as you are in the film? Many congratulations. Love, David.
Of course, acting in films isn't always an easy ride either. The Marx Brothers wanted to make their film A Night in Casablanca. But 5 years earlier, Warner Brothers had released their classic film, Casablanca. And so they threatened the Marx Brothers with legal action. Their legal team wanted to know all about the plot of the movie and the characters. Groucho Marx sent them many letters, but this was the final one.
Dear brothers, since I last wrote to you, I regret to say there have been some changes to the plot of our new picture, A Night in Casablanca. In the new version, I play Bordello, the sweetheart of Humphrey Bogart. Harpo and Chico are itinerant rug peddlers who are wary of lame rugs and enter a monastery for a lark. This is a good joke on them, as there hasn't been a lark in the monastery for 15 years. Across from the monastery, hard by a jetty, is a waterfront hotel, chock full of apple-cheeked damsels. Harpo marries the hotel detective, Chico operates an ostrich farm, and Humphrey Bogart's girl, Bordello, spends her last years in the Macaulay house. Now this, as you can see, is a skimpy outline. You claim you own a Casablanca and that no one can use that name without your permission? What about Warner Brothers? Do you own that too? You probably have the right to own the name Warner, but what about the brothers? Professionally, we were brothers long before you, and even more before us, there were other brothers. I have a hunch that this attempt to prevent us using this title is the brainchild of some ferret-faced hustler serving a brief apprenticeship in a legal department. Well, no pasty-faced legal adventurer is going to cause bad luck between the Warners and the Marxes. We are all brothers under the skin, and will remain friendly until the last reel of A Night in Casablanca goes tumbling over the spool. Sincerely, Groucho Marx.
The film was made in 1946. An actor's first performance is always a special memory. Here, a very young Ruth Gordon sends her parents news of her debut performance as Nibs in Peter Pan in 1915.
Dear Mama and Papa, well, it's all over, and you can be truly proud of me. When the curtain went up, I thought I should die of fright. Our scene started in the Never Never Land, and I was in my place inside the tree trunk. And I came out and said my line and got a huge laugh. They told me no one had ever got that laugh before, so it made quite an impression. When it came to the final curtain, Miss Adams said, "Nibs," and led me on. And while the audience applauded, she took a rose from the immense bouquet that had been passed over the footlights to her and handed it to me. I will treasure and preserve it forever. Well, that's it. Everybody told me I'd made the most auspicious start, and you will note that they are right. Your loving actress daughter, Ruth Gordon. A name you will one day see in life.
But inevitably, there comes a time when acting loses its magic, or perhaps the actor loses his skill. Kitty Clive to David Garrick.
My dear sir, is it really true that you have put an end to the glory of Drury Lane? In the height of public admiration for you, when you were never mentioned with any other appellation but Mr. Garrick, the charming man, or the fine fellow, the delightful creature, by both men and ladies, I have seen you with your magical hammer in your hand, endeavouring to beat your ideas into the heads of creatures who had none of their own. I have seen you with lamb-like patience, endeavouring to make them comprehend you, and when that could not be done, I have seen that lamb turn into a lion. By this, your great labour and pains, the public was entertained. They thought they all acted very fine. They did not see you pull the wires. Now, let them go on in their parts without your leading strings, and they will soon convince the world what genius is. Your devoted friend, Kitty.
Joey Grimaldi to a friend.
My dear friend, I am very ill. My days of staging are nearly over. I'm afflicted with rheumatism. Do come and see me. I feel truly miserable. Oh, for the days when I was delighting audiences at the Old Drury and the Wells. Come, dear friend, and cheer me up. With love. My dear friend.
The present circumstances, where theatres are closed because of a pandemic, is not new. At the end of the 16th century, the plague was killing thousands of people, especially in London. Theatres in London closed their doors. Edward Alleyne, one of the theatre owners, wrote a letter to his wife.
Hoping in God, though the sickness be round you, yet by his mercy it may escape your house. Keep your house fair and clean, which I know you will. I have no news to send you, as all is stopped here, and I am forced to seek work in the provinces. Says, thanks be unto God that we are all in good health. But round us it hath been in almost every house.
The present COVID pandemic has been devastating for the performing arts. So let's end with an extract from a short letter published by many national newspapers on behalf of theatres throughout the country.
We really miss being with you during this period of lockdown. Making theatre and performance is a collaborative endeavour, so we are particularly affected by having to be apart from one another right now. We're not able to come together in the same space to share the experience of a live performance. We're not able to practice and enjoy our art form in its most basic form. We want to offer a message of hope and solidarity. Our well-practiced ability to work together, to form connections and build relationships will help us through this. One day, hopefully soon, we will all be able to meet together as people have done for centuries, in a shared space, for a shared experience. In the meantime, we will remain committed to working for you and with you towards a sustainable future for theatre and performance.
With much love.
Yours sincerely.
With love.
Yours sincerely.
Anonymous.